Let's welcome Sandeep to Marketing for the Now.
Hi, Roy. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sandeep, how are you?
Very good, Gary. How are you doing? Thank you very much for today.
It's great to see you. So Sandeep and I get to interact because our VaynerMedia in Singapore gets to work very closely with this fine gentleman. So Sandeep, let's get right into it. Obviously, your part of the world felt the impact of the coronavirus earlier than we did here in the States and other parts of the world. What was, and it happened right away. It was like New Year, boom. How did that thought process go in your mind as such an important global leader? Was it obvious that it was going to be this serious? I remember the first, I'm glad I wasn't, I do pretty well with predictions, but luckily I was smart enough not to make any prediction videos because I was like, man, worst case, this is March, worst case, if everything goes wrong, we'll be back on 4th of July. I might just have to change that to 2021, and so, did you know it was going to be like this? Was the news there a little bit more like, hey, this is real? Obviously the region has felt with SARS and other things in the past a little bit more than the Americas have. And then after that answer, how did you then adjust and what's been the outcome?
Yeah, Gary, over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen lots of big crises out here, and we always prepare for that. In fact, on SK2, I'm known as the Chief Chaos Officer, always creating chaos for everyone. And we thought we were going to be ready for this, and when we first heard the news, but I've got to be very honest, nothing could have prepared us for what we've kind of seen over the last few months. And I would say broadly, we looked at our response in 3 phases, I would say. Phase 1, what we call reaction, was very primal. It was really about managing the unpredictability and safety of everyone. I would say first 4 to 6 weeks was really making sure, accounting for everyone. We've got over 5,000 beauty consultants who are out in the field. We've got a couple of thousand people across our plants and different sites on there. We had to also really understand each and every one of them. And then I'll use one of your words, empathy was critical there, because even safety meant many different things for each individual. How people react to this situation was very, very different. And as leaders, it was important for us to be available and kind of understand what individual needs was. And I would say first 4 to 6 weeks was all about accounting for everyone and making sure everyone is safe. And I would say phase 2 was responding to the communities. It's our responsibility as one of the leading brands to see how do we respond. And just to give you a couple of examples on what we did, one of them was we immediately jumped in China, which was of course the most affected and the first market there in terms of our donations through China Women's Development Fund, providing the medical supplies and other things that they were needing. And then we pivoted our supply chain and our plant, and we started manufacturing masks, because that was critical in terms of how can we provide free masks to all our employees, but also outside to our partners and everything, and we did that. And I think stage 3, which is what we're going through, is what we call re-emerge. How do we re-emerge stronger out of this crisis? And one of the things we always talk, when you're in crisis, when you're in chaos, the most important thing is stick to your identity. And for us, I would say there are 2 things: our brand's purpose, which is change destiny. It's really about how do we inspire the world in these situations. And, we worked with your team on launching the campaign with Japanese swimmer Ike Rikako. I don't know if you know about her, but she is one of the top Olympians from Japan, but she was diagnosed with leukemia over the last 18 months. And now she's at the stage where she's recovered. So bringing her story to everyone was really, very positive angle for us from a change destiny point of view, providing inspiration and hope, especially during this period. But the other part of our identity is really consumer obsession, truly trying to understand what is changing. And it's changing so massively, Gary, just to kind of tell you. It's very obvious to say everyone's going online, but then how do you do physical counseling? Like skincare is a very physical touch feel thing. Like how do you kind of work in that environment? And I think we had to significantly pivot on that. Some of the examples I can talk about, how do we move from counseling in a department store to e-counseling, right? Having our beauty consultants live online, which is not an easy shift for all of them, right?
No.
We were experimenting with some of the, human AI like chatbots, which now becomes a reality. So we've gone live in the US with that, and we're trying to go live in other markets. And we've also luckily been working on what we call Future X. This is a project that we are working on transforming the department store physical environment using technologies like, facial recognition, eye tracking and everything. And it was the right time for us to now jump into that and bring this to life, because even when people go out, they're looking for contactless kind of an experience. So how do you do that without a physical contact or getting close to anyone? We kind of coined it as phygital, bringing physical and digital together and kind of bring it there. So I think through these three phases, we are trying to kind of cope with what I would say in my 20 years plus working here, one of the biggest crises that we've seen. And as you just mentioned, it's impossible to predict when this is going to be over, to be honest, right?
Before I hand it, I apologize, Sandeep. Before I hand it to Roy for a question, because I was so excited about this part, SK2 was an official sponsor of the Tokyo Olympics. A lot of money, a lot of work goes into something like that. I can't imagine how much planning was happening over the last 24 months. How do you pivot with something like that? Like what's the update there?
Yeah, that was massive. I mean, look, you know it very well. 2020 was year of Olympics. I mean, being a brand from Japan and Olympics being in Tokyo was the biggest thing. We were like the acting hosts for this Olympics, and we had put our entire year's budget behind that. Now, here's the good news. We are fully committed to Olympics, and we are fully behind all our athletes, and in fact, going beyond that to support all of them. So nothing changes from that front. Having said that, we had to completely pivot our plans. Gary, you're aware, our campaign that we were putting together was the first of its kind 6-episode manga series under the big idea of beauty is no competition. And we had actually done a pre-launch on 3rd of March in New York at Times Square. We'd taken over Times Square and had done
I remember.
there.
To think about you and I hanging out in Times Square at that scale,
yes,
and for the world to be completely different 2 weeks later, it's unbelievable to think about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I returned back from the US on the 10th of March, and I didn't leave home after that for like 4 months, like working from home. So that was a massive pivot for us. But luckily, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we had a 7th athlete, Ike Rikako, whom we were working with. She was going through leukemia at that stage. And we realized beauty is no competition is not that contextual and relevant when people are going through such a big human crisis at this point. And here's the great news. We heard that Ike Rikako fully recovered from her leukemia, and her doctors allowed her to get back to the pool and start now practicing for the Olympics. Now, the sad part is it's pushed out by a year, but it's great. Now she gets a chance probably to go back there. And so we moved away from, beauty is no competition to really talk about the human story of this person to bring back hope. And this was, our Japanese consumers responded very, very positively to that. The world is looking for some positive news at this point. And as brands, we could be that force for good to kind of bring this together. So we had to massively pivot both in terms of our campaign, but also how we sell in this period, right? Where people's mind is, in so many different places, we still need to run the business. And there was a massive pivot, which again, we're working with your team and the others together to see how we move from just pushing and selling our products to serving them in a way that creates a bit of empathy towards the brand and the situation, and really makes the brand creates that connection between the brand and our consumers. So this has been a massive pivot, but I would say we are fully behind the Olympics, and we are fully behind the athletes, and looking forward to how we really make this campaign come to life in a slightly different way, in a slightly different tone, because I don't think the world is ready and receptive for the things that we had planned earlier.
Understood. Roy, any final questions for our friend here?
Sandeep, Seth, Global CEO, SK2. To that point with Japan, as a global company, how much of this pivot do you believe is temporary versus going to be permanent, in the sense of being able to, the buying habits globally the buying habits of consumers are going to be different from country to country. So the messaging already has to be different in a non-COVID atmosphere. Post-COVID, we know that the retail structure is going to change in a lot of countries. We know that the buying habits, just because the stores are open doesn't mean every consumer is going to be comfortable coming back to the store. So do you see your company pivoting into some sort of hybrid model in a permanent capacity, or is everything you're doing right now just in the temporary as you feel things out month to month?
Look, it's always difficult to predict where things will go, but where I stand is I think there are going to be some really big and permanent changes on how we live our lives, to be honest. And that's going to impact retail. That's going to impact how people shop. You're rightly saying, I mean, today when shoppers are going to the store, they're all wearing a mask, right? And no one wants to take the mask off. Our beauty consultants are wearing a shield, right? And in fact, in some places, there's a glass barrier between them. So suddenly the whole place has become a fortress, right? So how do you interact in that situation where you're doing that? So even, as things improve, I think this is a change that's going to be permanent. Probably it's going to be a good change where the adoption of technology is going to be much faster. I know there are a lot of memes as to, who's creating the digital transformation today? Is it the CEO, CFO, or CTO? It's actually COVID that's creating probably the biggest digital transformation.
100%.
That's what's happening
100%.
on how things are. So yeah, I'm expecting a lot of big changes to come. And I think brands that are going to be agile enough to learn fast, businesses that are going to show empathy to this, probably will be the one emerging strongest.
Sandeep, before we let you go, any consumer behavior shifts that you've had for yourself? Are you watching anything, listening to anything? Have you bought things online that you've never bought in the past? And now you're like, wait a minute, I should have been buying bananas online the whole time. Anything like that?
Actually, that's so true. I mean, look, we pretty much shifted to buying everything home. Like it started by ordering food, right? I mean, you were getting bored cooking at home. So pretty much every meal was, getting ordered from outside and restaurants that I'd never explored before. But it's a big shift. I've just ordered some shoes from the US last week. So I think we are all getting comfortable in buying things without trying.
There's never a bad time to buy some off-whites. Never.
Yes.
That I'm on board.
You know that. I mean, I'm into those.
Roy, I think we got one more minute here. Anything else on your mind?
No, that's it. We can talk offline about trying to get my girl some free product.
There we go.
Man.
Absolutely right. Any day for you.
You
could take a boy from Birmingham, but you can't take the Birmingham out of the boy. I like that, Roy. I know what you did there. I appreciate it. Sandeep, thank you so much. Thank you for being a part of this, and thank you for that global perspective. We'll talk soon. Love you.
Thank you. Pleasure. Bye.